Our human rights conversation continues today, and our next one is now looking at violations on human rights versus leadership and the cost of bad leadership, bad governance, including corruption into that. Transparency International Kenya has been in the country for many years and has been championing good governance, and especially looking at that side of, corruption, and then that leadership and integrity chapter in the Constitution. They contributed a lot into having it there. Sheila Masinde is the current executive director. She's our guest. Good morning.
Good morning.
Karibu sana.
Thank you. It's good to be back home.
Right, back home.
Coincidentally, 20 years ago, I worked on this very same floor.
Right here.
Yes.
Yeah?
Home sweet home. Home sweet home.
Doing the right thing.
I hope I get the bonus. I better get the bonus. I had talking about bonuses earlier.
Yeah.
That's why I said when you prolong, it messes with my head.
It messes with my head too.
I know the same way, Sheila, you had. I'm sure even Jeff had it. And he was like, by the way, actually, I was not aware that I'm supposed to be addressing the staff today. Group CEO. He loves to do that.
Yeah.
Jano is going to welcome you with the day's quote.
Thank you.
Right, today's quote is by somebody called Bayard Rustin, who was an American political activist and a key leader in social movements for civil rights. He once said, "Protest is the rent we pay for living in a democracy." What comes to mind when you hear that?
I think it means that we have to be the vanguards of democracy and, keep the civic space free. And it means that we constantly have to fight for it. I don't think that was when we started practicing democracy, that was the ideal of the fathers and mothers of democracy. But we're in a situation where we keep on seeing backsliding in the democratic space, and we have to just keep on fighting for it. And it means just we can't give up. It doesn't mean that we always have to be in a perpetual fight, but it means that we have to be vigilant and have to continue watching the space. And it calls on us as citizens, all levels of citizens, to always watch the space.
Is protest a negative thing?
No, it's not a negative thing. It's not a negative thing. It is, I think, and you've seen that in countries where this is so beautifully done. I was watching a protest which was being covered in the news in the UK over the weekend by Amnesty International. No cops, no tear gas. Okay, cops were possibly there, but just to watch and ensure, to protect the citizens who are exercising their rights, their civil liberties. So it is, I think, in some countries where we've seen an extreme reaction to people coming together to the freedom of assembly. And we've been discussing how police react, the state reacts, and in my own view, even in this country, we've seen few instances where people have come together to exercise their right to assembly, their right to association, right to movement, and so on, and where police have actually stepped back and just kept the space safe, and there has been no violence that is normally associated with protests and demonstrations.
Is there a difference between then a protest and, let's say, a street march? Because there you'll find, and there are some days when to mark this day, people will walk around with banners, occupy one lane of a road, walking down Kenyatta Avenue.
It's a form of protest,
right?
I think.
Is that a protest or is that just a march?
They're all exercising. It's all part of exercising your freedom of expression. Right. You're expressing something, and you see, a protest could be in different forms. It could be speaking. It could be keeping silent. That's a form of protest. It could be going out on the streets. It could be going out to the streets and sitting. So there are different forms of protest. I think in countries like Kenya, you hear protest and you just think of tear gas, violets, stones, and also,
Have we ever had a time in our history when protest looked like, what you're describing, what was happening in the UK? Essentially, the police come out.
Actually, there are many. That's why I said,
no.
Is there a difference between protest and a street march?
Not marking the International Day of da-da-da-da. No, you know what I mean. I mean people who have some genuine feeling about something. They're, feeling either disenfranchised or locked out for one reason or the other, and they decide to express their grievances in the streets, and things are peaceful, quiet, easy. Police protect them. They go home. Nothing is disrupted, and we move on.
I've seen that. I mean, I've participated in processes. Now you're not.
You quickly edited.
Edited, a verbal edit.
Let's call them protests.
Yes.
So we show that protest is not negative.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Where there was where people came together to give petitions, present petitions, protest about misgovernance or violations. I think one that clearly comes to mind 10 years ago was when lawyer, is it Willy Mwangi? Willy Mwangi was killed, and you had this huge, numbers of people coming, the lawyer, the legal fraternity, human rights defenders, and many others who came. And it was peaceful.
Right.
It was peaceful despite the tension that was there and the pain that was there, because we had just lost, William Mwangi in a very sad state.
Yeah,
true.
And as I said, there are many other examples.
And femicide being a great example as well.
Yeah, as well, that too.
And femicide,
The
I
first
think.
one.
The first
Yeah.
one, yes.
Born on December 10th, 2024. Was a bit different. It started with tear gas.
Yeah. Right.
Just 1, 2, 3. We started the march, tear gas.
Yeah.
But now people are actually paying a cost for protest. People
Exactly.
have lost their lives, etc. I want to move to this link with rights, right? Like human rights. So we lose a lot of money in this country. There's a lot of money lost to corruption. I want you to tell us how that directly erodes the rights of people, how it directly kind of erodes the rights of Kenyans.
Corruption is a human rights violation. Because the moment money is stolen from Kenyans, money is stolen from the taxpayers, from the public coffers, you're violating people's economic, social rights. You're violating their right to health, right to education, right to critical services, because that money is being diverted from, a critical good or service to someone's private account or pocket. We've seen instances. Look at how we've been talking about, for instance, the health sector and the concerns that we have in terms of how the social health insurance scheme is being governed, and the concerns around who's getting those contracts. And on the other end of it is Kenyans, the complaints that we still can't get services. I go into a hospital and I'm not guaranteed that, despite having contributed to the social health, insurance scheme SHA, that I will actually, get services and get my bills paid, get a portion of my bills or all the, the entire bill paid through SHA. Look at the extreme situations, for instance, in at the grassroots levels, at the county levels, where, for instance, the hospitals exist, there's an infrastructure, but then you go there and you don't get maybe doctors, you don't get nurses, or even if you are seen by a medic, you get a prescription, but then you can't access, the medicines, and then you're told, oh, if you want that medicine, take that prescription to that, private pharmacy there, and then you realize, oh, this private pharmacy is actually owned by someone who's actually employed and paid by your taxpayers to give you services in the medical institution. Look at the education sector, and I think we don't need to go so far. Look at what happened, for instance, during the transition from grade 9 to grade 10. And the complaints that parents had, the frustrations that parents felt in terms of just being able to track, okay, so where has your child been called to school, trying to get that letter, or your child has done so well, but then they've been called to a school, you think, okay, this is not, my child could have been called to a better school. And all these complaints, and children, actually, many of them, there are reports of that, who didn't report on time because they couldn't find the letters to the schools where they had been actually been called to been admitted. That's a violation of their rights, because that time children should have been in school, but they've not been reported because someone has messed up the system, because you want to ensure that someone has backdoor access to an opportunity that someone else worked so hard to access. Look at the situation right now where many Kenyans are not able to put food on the table, basic things. People cannot afford, we say 3 square meals, but I think nowadays many people are on 2 mad 1. We say, oh, mad 1 meal a day. Even that 1 meal a day is difficult. True. But at the same time, the government is prioritizing shine, what I call shiny development. It's highways, it's expressways, SGRs, and all those, and this stadium, all these things. They're good, but if the basic things have been provided for Kenyans, but in a country where people are struggling with the basic things, with food, with health, but you want to focus on the big things. But you know why they focus on that? Is because that's what they're able to extract from. Provision of food, of basic things for Kenyans will not put money in your pocket as a private individual, but you're able to extract, through botching the public contracting process or so on, and that's why they're focusing so much on the SGRs and the railways and the expressways and all these things, and it's all coming at the expense of Kenyans. So that's why we say that corruption is a gross violation of the human rights when you look at how it compromises the attainment of your economic and social rights, your cultural rights, and even your political and civil rights. Look at what's happening even in the political arena when you talk about free and fair and credible elections, how we have had issues with our elections and concerns around even the processes, but even the outcome, particularly in terms of the people who then get elected. There are concerns that these are corrupted processes. When you look at even the money that is being used for the campaigns, it's money sometimes that is extracted from taxpayers. It is money that is gotten illicitly through procurement deals going to your connected bodies. It's money that is being illicitly acquired through money laundering and all other dirty money tactics, and then you use that to gain access to a public office or to fund someone to gain access. So that is really a violation of our political and civil rights. When you look even at the aspect around leadership and integrity and the continued that people who have been accused of corruption, people who have even been found guilty of corruption, been impeached from office, still been allowed to vie and continue to seek public office, and then they get through and then violate our rights further by stealing
and
more.
have large support. Still on corruption, you've stated some which we know and are obvious. Is corruption... Okay, I guess it is evolving. I was going to ask if it's evolving. So bad. It's Eric.
Intrusive thoughts.
Intrusive thoughts. Is corruption becoming more sophisticated? Are there some things that we can't see that actually...
Corruption has always been, is it covert?
Okay.
Covert.
There's no undercover...
Is it covert? No, covert is hidden. Covert is hidden, yes.
Ah, really?
Covert is hidden. And that's why until now, we can't say we know the full scale of corruption in Kenya. We can have estimates about this is the cost of corruption. Like now we hear, we lose 2 billion shillings a day. 30% of our national budget is lost to corruption. But I always think that is actually an understatement because a lot of it is not uncovered. By the time the Auditor General is doing their reports, there's a lot of information that they may not be able to have when the investigations are being done. So I always say that is just, the tip of the iceberg because there's so much that goes unnoticed, unreported, uninvestigated, and uncovered, and because it has always been, the corrupt always, can I say, they will always innovate, and that's why for us who are fighting corruption, the task is on us, and we always have to think of new ways of fighting corruption. What we did 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, you have to keep changing how you detect, the detection and handling of corruption has to always change.
True.
And I know that our agencies, that's why they also have to invest a lot in terms of the tools they're using, their forensic tools particularly to be able to detect. Right now we're in this era of tech, we're looking at an increase in transnational crimes, money moving from one country to another, and you look at the whole question around illicit financial flows. There are countries like Kenya which have been noted as, being key sources of destinations and also transit points for illicit finances. This is facilitated by,
By corruption.
But also technology in terms of how money is moving. In this era of cryptocurrencies, how are we, upscaling the fight against corruption? So, while, as I said, people who steal, you're always thinking of, okay, so Sheila and others are looking at, say, bribery. As we have moved on to another form of corruption. I mean, bribery will still continue to exist, but you'll see that now there's a new way of stealing. I mean, look at just how corruption has evolved in Kenya. I mean, at least what we know.
Okay.
At some point, maybe say 30 years ago, we were dealing so much with toa kitu kidogo. Eventually, it became toa kila kitu. But then,
ukitaka chai,
yes. But when they realized we are focusing so much on the bribery, it moved to budgeted corruption. I will steal in a very legitimized manner. If I budget for a pen and the pen is 10 bob, but on the budget which is passed by Parliament is 100 shillings. You have totally legitimized corruption because I will report that I've bought that pen. I bought it at 10 bob, but if the budget there says 100, then I'll buy it at 100 bob and pocket the 90 bob, and I will account for it, but still keep that 90 shillings. And that's how it started happening. So we started looking into budgets and really scrutinizing and looking at what could be padded or inflated costs. And then it simply moved to other ways. Right now you're seeing, I would say one of the key ways is what I call legislated or projected corruption.
I know what you're. I'm not letting my intrusive thoughts win, but there's a big. Let me not let the intrusive thoughts win. But go on.
Yes, I was one of the
legislative
in terms
corruption.
In terms of like, just look at how, for instance, laws have been quickly changed. When you look at the social health, insurance scheme. Recently, we're looking at, say, the Privatization Act, and there was some opposition to that. People even went to court. I think more recently, even that the public-private partnerships model, and what has been changed in the laws to accommodate all these, new initiatives. And when you really look at it, it's about creating opportunities for people, to be able to get wealth illicitly.
Right.
Yeah, to get contracts illicitly.
It's a scandal.
So you change systems. You change systems through the law, through policies, create new institutions, but to create opportunities for people to take away money illicitly from taxpayers.
You've answered my question. It's institutionalized corruption, like you've said, and it's scandals in waiting. A lot of the legislation we've seen happen over the amendments to the Conflict of Interest Act. So many of them are just scandals in waiting, and it'll be a matter of time. And I wanted to get into how systemic corruption is, but you've essentially answered that, because it came from it's 50 bob, 200, which still happens. It's 50 bob, 200 bob here and there, to now making its way into budgetary processes. I'm a tenderpreneur. If I tell you a tissue one is 300 bob, what are you going to tell me? That's my markup. It's how I do business. And then now into our laws. Walk me through who the system works for, and because it seems to work against almost everyone, but why it still exists in such a corrupt fashion if it's working for 0.01% of the population. Or maybe it's more, and I'm outside. When they say you're hating on the party and you can't even get in, maybe that's why I'm like,
maybe I want to also be
I think to also get in at the party.
You're the minority outside. I think the majority are outside.
The minority.
I am the minority outside, thinking we're all in this together.
I think the majority may be defined by how much you have, because they say, when you say even you're a country of what 10 billionaires. 10
10 billionaires.
Yes, you're a country of, so there are very few billionaires, but there are more of us who seem to be struggling.
Yes.
And I mean, that's why I started from, and I mentioned the issue of even the campaign financing, because for me that is how this whole system gets corrupted, because people are in a country like Kenya, where political or public office is such high stakes, and you ask yourself, why is it do or die to become an MCA? Why is it do or die to become a member of parliament. You know, in other countries like in Europe, these are just ordinary people. You meet them on the streets, they take the train, they're biking. I mean, you keep on seeing this video of this guy from the former, I think he was it the Prime Minister of Netherlands who was leaving office and he leaves
Cycling.
And it keeps on circulating. And people ask, why don't you see leaders in that sense? You know, there's so much lagis associated with leadership and everything, you know. But generally, even, I mean, we've seen that data where there's always comparisons drawn between how much, you know, our
campaign financing,
and how much, not even that, but before we get to that, how much people from public office are drawn in terms of salaries. Because in some other countries, if you want to be rich, if you want to make money, you stay in the private sector, you know. But here, you see people leaving private sector jobs, people leaving media jobs.
For income purposes.
And yet these are in other countries where...
To earn less.
To earn
less.
Yes. But and then you look at the amount that say, so if, for instance, if a member of parliament is going to earn, I don't know, is it now something between, well, I think when it comes, but it all comes down, plus the allowances comes to about 1 point something million, right? And then you ask yourself, so in 5 years, you're only going to earn 60 million. But then you have blown more than 300 million or more on a campaign for a constituency
Can
seat.
you pause there, Sheila?
Sure.
Just because we're going into a break. And then we'll come back and get into the question of the party, the inside and the outside, and who profits and who benefits. But we are talking about the cost of corruption, quite literally how it comes into the cost of human rights. We'll come back with that conversation. It's coming up to 8:30. I can also see some of you have shared your feedback. We'll read it after the break. A lot of feedback online. It keeps coming in. Ask Jeremy 254 says, nowadays we talk about billions stolen, not millions, and Kenyans aren't moved. It's like we're numbed. We've resigned to fate. Our laws don't catch up with big fish. It's just advisory. Okay, Sheila can speak to some of this in a bit. Jotham Kipruto says, what ails us more is the fact that we've made corruption so normal that even we are okay with small corruption while calling it big corruption. It doesn't change anything. Corruption begins with me. Simon Obotes, corruption is bad when I'm not involved. Yes. Josie Kibere, I remember when Piolo Lumumba said that corruption is the most profitable business in Kenya today, and he was right, which is something that Sheila was just alluding to in terms of politics. About two more. Anthony Mbogwa says, I see very slow response on how fast EACC acts on exposed corruption reports when Public Accounts Committees meets the governors. Why is that? Don Sabwa, hey, Don, you're back. Corruption for sure has evolved, especially now. It sits at the budget and policy formulation, especially in the current regime. Don Sabwa, you had every chance to say, in Malawi, corruption, we say. Now, Mariam, let's go.
I'm sure he's never told us what corruption is.
I think he has. He probably has.
From Malawi.
Just remind us, yes.
Chichewa.
Yes.
We'll find it. We'll find it. But also, don't tell me how to say congratulations in Chichewa.
Yes. So
that
that when Afixa meets Mariam, she's quick. She can do it real quick.
No, Pambira something. I'm warm.
Yeah.
Just let me know.
Interesting.
So Sheila, you've seen all that feedback. People are basically saying a lot of people are pointing it back to it starts with me. Which people don't like hearing. They're like, but I'm not corrupt. But you were threading on something around parliament and how people make 60 million in a few years, spend 300 million.
Yeah. It's not just election. I mean, it's not just parliament. I was just saying the entire looking at the election process and how people are sent to leadership in this country. I mean, so you spend a lot of money. You're not going to be able to recoup that money through your salary or through the salary and allowances. So if I've spent 300 million for a job that's going to pay me 60 million for 5 years. Okay, do the math. See, I'm on a deficit of negative 240 million. Where am I going to get it from? I have to recoup. Maybe I've borrowed, I've promised people have campaigned for me. I've given handouts to an 50 bobs. They amount to something. You know, that money has to come from somewhere. You know, so my own theory is that if we don't regulate how the money that people spend to get into public office, we will continue suffering with this problem of corruption. Because the moment I get into office, the first call is, okay, I spent this, I have to recoup. The people you borrowed from or who generously donated to your campaign who are on your back, dude, I need a contract, I need a job. In fact, nowadays, I don't think it's more about the jobs because we realize these jobs are not paying so well. Just give me a contract, I recoup this money. So then that goes to the issue of procurement. How are procurement decisions made?
Right.
Tie that in with now when you talk about corruption is through budget formulation. Now, when that pen is costing 100 shillings and not 10, where is that 90 bob going? When laws are quickly changed so that you change a system, because the old system may not work for you. It has its people who are benefiting, and now you need to create space for new benefactors and so on. You change the system, create opportunities, opportunities for new contracts and so on. So that's how the election system, how people get into office, procurement decisions, and all these things are related. Well, I'm happy that right now we have the new conflict of interest law, and I think the regulations which were just gazetted the other day. And I think having that conflict of interest regime is important because that's been a big problem in this country. So if we have a set system in terms of, declaration of conflict and interests, declaration of wealth, and ESCC and also other responsible commissions are empowered and given the resources to be able to monitor, and not just monitor, but verify, because there's been a big problem of verification. If I declare I'm worth this amount, but there's no one verifying, what's the point of that information?
Sure.
So now we're expecting that there'll be stringent verification processes, access to information by ESCC and other commissions which are being tasked to monitor issues around declaration of interests and wealth, looking into declaration of conflicts, into issues around procurement. I think I have there's a glimmer of hope that we will be able to regulate some of these things. On campaign financing,
before you go on,
yeah,
it's it's because you mentioned how now the legislative corruption and the conflict of interest amendment act is by and large really good, but then there's one exception it makes for public servants participating in campaigns, with the exception of cabinet secretaries. Again, how did we arrive at this being the only exception? But I hear what you're saying. So
that's also the conflict of interest law. That's also the conflict of interest law. I think, one of the key gaps still in the conflict of interest is still the fact that I think for us at the highest level of conflict, we should have just outlawed that if you're in government,
do not do
business. Simple. Decide where you want to be. Do you want to be in government or do you want to be in private sector? If you're going to be in 5 years or 10 years in government, say, in this years, I am going to give my service to citizens.
Okay.
Yeah.
Define
I am
not
going to
doing
serve.
business.
Meaning?
Or not doing business with government.
Not doing business with government.
Okay.
Meaning that you recuse any of your institutions will not be or companies are not going to bid for government procurement. But still, I think in essence, there's always that conflict of even if my businesses are not doing business with government, then where's your focus? I mean, also from a human resource perspective, where's your focus? And yet you're being paid to work for government. But I mean, that's a whole argument. It's a whole Pandora's box. But I think at the highest level,
I agree.
Most practical level,
don't do business
with government.
Yeah.
Because we've had many cases where you're seated on that seat, on that swivel seat, and you're the one signing a contract to your own company, because even the beneficial ownership of that company has not been fully declared. Who's the real owner of that company,
and who's a proxy.
But as I said, there's been still, despite all these challenges, there's been some progress even with our beneficial ownership transparency regime. We're not at that point where we are fully compliant. I think I had the business registry services saying that we're still at 50% in terms of compliance in terms of beneficial ownership regulations and ensuring that there's transparency in that space. So there's still a bit to do, but there has been some distance moved, at least even in terms of putting some of these regulations in place.
We are doing so much work on systems.
Yes, that's the thing.
System, this system, the other. Sheila, in those examples of those countries that you've, like the one you've given us, where a prime minister walks out of office, says, cheers guys, takes his bike, goes home. Tomorrow, you'll find him in the park, at the park in the afternoon. Do they have this kind of laws? That, now declare your wealth. We are going to have 17 officers who are going to come and verify whether the wealth that you declared is actually the wealth that you declared. Do they have that?
Actually, a lot of countries do have laws on conflict of interest and beneficial ownership. It is just that the laws are actually implemented.
Right. Because
there's political will. So, you can have the systems, you can have the laws, the policies, the institutions, but it really goes back to people. Who are the people? Do they have the will to implement these laws?
So it's a software issue.
It's a software issue. It's not a hardware issue.
And in Kenya, we focus so much on hardware. Every time we come up with something, we come up with a new law, with a new regulation, with a new this, with a new institution.
It is a political will and the people and the culture. Let's put it boils down to those issues. So you find it, and then also it's accountability. What I've seen in some of these countries where systems actually work, people follow the law. If you're in leadership, you're not acting for yourself as an individual or your cronies, you're acting for the people. It's because there's a strong level of accountability. And where there are consequences. I think in Kenya also the level of impunity has been so high. I was even listening to the conversation you're having with Chair Clarice just before this one, and it just boils down to impunity, and I just met on the staircase when I was coming, and I said she was very articulate, but I don't agree with everything that she has said or their positions in regard to this compensation framework. Because one of the other questions I'm asking, if we're going to curtail impunity, because the problem in Kenya is impunity. Laws are not followed. People don't do their job because there's impunity. That issue of utadu. So now with this whole compensation framework, my question has been, and I agree, people should be compensated for all these violations against them, but there's a right way to do it. If we're really going to say that we're going to attain and meet the goals of restorative or reparative justice, because now there's a question of 2 billion shillings has been given. This 2 billion shillings is from taxpayers. You mean you have hurt me, you have killed a member of my family, you have maimed someone I know, you have caused a disruption to livelihoods, and then you still want to come back to us, sisi, taxpayers, do tunalipa. Where will that person who has been violating, where will the perpetrator start feeling the pain and the pinch? If I just know the next protest, police will still shoot to kill, because they know, ata kama people go to court, or if people seek all these frameworks, that it is not my money, it is not me who will pay for it. It is still you who is crying and who has been injured and who has suffered a loss. That money will still come back from you. So there's a whole fundamental question of justice and accountability that has to be met. And if we don't address these things, we will never disrupt impunity at all levels. Whether you're talking about impunity and the corruption that continues to prevail because of impunity and people not getting punished, or even the human rights violations because people are not getting punished.
Can't
Mariam,
agree more.
I have
the same views.
I have been screaming this at the top of my lungs. Justice first. And when the taxpayer picks up the bill, who is being held accountable? And it's not to say, again, not that people should not get compensated, but when the taxpayer picks up the bill, who is being held accountable?
One of the things that racks my mind every day is just how we dance around perpetrators. Everywhere in the world. I'm just, the other day there was, I think it's in India, a group of people came up with a women's only nightclub. And I said to myself, these people have tried the law, it didn't work for them. A lot of the founder was like, we've reported rape, we've reported assault, nobody listens. We've said the only way we can be safe. And I'm like, it's so sad that it has to come to that, because we just dance around perpetrators globally. And until we make that perpetrators know, actually, this is on me and it's going to ruin me, it's going to ruin my family, then we'll keep adjusting. So what we do now is we adjust around them. We're like, let's also introduce ride-hailing for women only. It's good because it cushions her, she feels safe, but then you're still dancing around.
You're still not dealing with the problem, the elephant in the room.
Every day, gyms, everybody's just coming up with things to be like, and it's because the laws don't work. And everybody who's come up with those says, we tried. It happened to me. I reported it. I know my perpetrator and he's free. So anyway.
Now what?
Laws don't work because the people do not want them to work. Listen, we can always point, and we are very good at that, at seeing we have come up with a new law, that we've put in people into this office, and we have appointed Sheila, who has worked very many years at Transparency International. She therefore should go to EACC, and then Sheila will be at EACC for 2 months. And Sheila, look, what happened to you? I mean, people get into public office, and my God, Sheila. It's because, Sheila, you get in there and you'll start telling us, look, we have all these things, we move, we get so many blocks, and we do not have sufficient even public support. The public does not want to fight corruption in this country. I put in that. Here is Francis Odhiambo saying, the saddest bit about corruption is that the current office bearers vie for posts just to be in power to cover their back. They hang on public offices to evade taxes and avoid accountability. So who puts them into those offices? They come to us, they campaign, we can see clearly this person has so many questions to answer about integrity, but we appoint them into office, we elect them into office. And then we know when they go into office, we're telling them, you go in there so that you can fight with these other guys who are as corrupt as you, so they don't take you to court. And should they take you to court, come back to us, to Waonyeshe.
Go and out-corrupt them.
Yeah, come back to us to Waonyeshe. We shall be complaining how, I mean, you know, this person is being targeted. Why are they being targeted? I mean, they're just junior, and so on and so forth. From your many years at Transparency International, do you think the Kenyan citizens can do more, better, to ensure that then we are fighting corruption and dealing with impunity once and for all? What do we need to do?
I think that Kenyan citizens can do more and better, and there have been instances where we have seen that, like say 2024, even with citizens just coming together to reject the economic violations and abuses that were going to happen through the finance bill of 2024. For me, that was an example of the power of citizens. You know, sovereign power. That mad belief that sovereign power belongs to the people of Kenya, and I've seen other instances, even when Kenyans have made decisions and come together and said, no, this one we must reject this, you know, we must support this. The other element that you see, and I've raised this, is that our processes are corrupted. So if someone is going to use money to get into public office, for instance, I'm going to buy votes, because I'm going to use money to intimidate another candidate, I'm going to, you know, bribe voters and so on. That's the element of campaign financing. I'm also talking about dirty money in politics, campaign money, and we are not regulating this. We also have to protect citizens from these elements. You know, I'm not saying that citizens can make their own decisions, but we also have to clean the path. We have to clean the pathway to public office by doing such things around campaign money regulation, and also just outwardly saying, no, if you have been, if you're someone not fit, suitable, competent for public office, you should be locked out. There are certain factors that we should also ensure to clean up that space, but also as we continue to encourage citizens to do the right thing. I think in all senses, what we need in this country is moral courage from citizens to say no to bad, poor, corrupt leadership, and also moral courage from those people who get into public office, because we were just using the example that good people get into office and then there's all these things to be done, and then you find that they have done nothing because they find that they're defeated by the system, or just feel that no, you're unable to speak up, or you feel threatened and so on. And me, what I always say, please, if you don't have the courage, please don't ask for the job. Don't even apply for the job if you know you're going to get into that office and you're going to disappoint us. Because increasingly, time without number, we have been disappointed by the individuals who have taken public office in this country. People take office, and they promise things, and they're good people, but then they don't have the moral courage. You can be good, but you also don't have the moral courage to do the work, to call out what is bad. But that's a big problem.
I agree, and I see that. However, then if we tell the good people don't get in, then you're just saying, let it be done by the bad people.
No.
Because there's a good person, the moral courage will not be an individual. And that's why I was saying, if the citizens do not support the people, the good people in those offices, if Sheila gets into EACC and Sheila does not feel that she has wind beneath her wings, that's a wind behind her sails, and that is the citizen saying, we are with you. Do what you need to do. We are with you.
Yeah.
If the citizens don't feel that, if politician Janet comes to the public and says, what were EACC? And we're like, yeah, EACC. And the next time we're meeting Sheila, how do we have confidence in EACC? When
But you see,
you'll feel,
But Eric, it has to start from you getting into that office and inspiring public confidence.
But that's the first thing that I did. I applied for this work because I felt.
Fine. Applying is preliminary.
I went
applying
through the
is a preliminary action.
I have put myself forth.
Yes.
To do the job.
Great.
To do the good job.
Yes.
I get in there, then I find I am all alone, and I'm trying to scream, and nobody's listening.
I look at
then the louder voices, which are the hyenas.
Yeah.
A hyena laughs here, and the hyena's laughter can be heard in Thika.
Yeah. Yes, but I've seen people who find themselves as the lone voice, but they will stand on that podium alone and scream and do what they must. Look at the work that Okiya Omtata does, even as a senator, even as an elected official. He's literally alone in a sea of people who don't really care much about the public interest, but he repeatedly stands up for citizens. He continues to do what he must.
If Okiya were not going to court, if Okiya did not continue with what he was doing before going to the Senate, if we look at just Okiya in Senate, I'm telling you, we'd be banding Okiya with all the other senators. When governors say senators are corrupt, we'll be looking at look at Okiya Omtata. Even before he went, he used to go to court. He was a champion for the people. Nowadays, how many times do you hear Okiya Omtata speaking in the Senate? We'll be judging Okiya from that.
I think it's a bit of both, guys. Because I get what both of you are saying. Truth is, Okiya, when he started this crusade, he was by and large by himself. Just a guy going to court endlessly. And over time, it's now, Okiya is our guy, we're behind him, Okiya this, Okiya the fifth, Okiya this, Okiya that. It happens. Even now, you actively see it in the way protests used to happen. It used to be Boniface Mwangi and 10 others. A few guys who felt disenfranchised, who were feeling, you know what, this is not working. And they would show up, and the rest of us were just living our best lives as if no one is quite literally on the streets fighting for our rights. Now then you see the Gen Z protests, and it's everybody.
It's multiplied.
So it takes, it's a moment. The same way the culture of impunity took its time permeating, so will the opposite. But I think we're getting there.
I like that. I like how you've said, the way impunity took its time. Because again, I always go back to 2024, and I think everyone, even you've mentioned it, that was a moment of saying together. Then it was shot out, and the worst thing happened. I want to now also go to this Transparency International Corruption Index for countries. Are we 126 or something? 25 out of 186.
Actually, the ranking is not important. The ranking is not important because you could score 100, and you could be 100 of you with 100 points, and so you'll be at 100. So ranking is not so important because it's based on the performance of other countries. What is important is the score. So for the score for Kenya, currently for last year, the score for Kenya was 30 out of 100.
Sounds about right.
And that was a drop from 32. That was a drop from 32 out of 100. And really, in that score, 100 being very good, 100 being clean, and then 0 being very corrupt. And so, actually, 2/3 of the countries around the world score below 50. Any score below 50 shows that there's severe corruption in that country. So for Africa, I think the average score was 32. So we are also below the average score for Africa, below the global average. So not doing well. Actually, not doing well at all. Because 30 in this CBE era, I don't know, 30 is what?
Below expectation.
Below. You're not even approaching. You're not meeting. You're not approaching. You're just below. Very below.
The reason I'm asking is, what does that translate to? Because I've told Mariam and Eric before, I tend to go very apocalyptic with my thoughts. I go like, ooh, worst case. But for me, it signals that the further we go this way, it completely disrupts any sense of being able to have access to rights. What have you seen when you look at countries who just continue to to get comfortable with being below expectations. Worst case scenario, what happens and what does that mean for the rights of people in Kenya? What does it mean 5-10 years from now if we just continue to be below expectation?
If you don't deal with corruption decisively, because it means that then you're not going to be able to provide the basic services. I started by that: education, health, roads. I mean, just looking at the state of the country will be in a very bad state. Look at the countries which are below the rung in the Corruption Perceptions Index. Sudan, Somalia, Venezuela. When you don't deal with corruption in your home state, that is what happens to your country. And then when you're starting to deal with the diminished resources, you can't access basic goods. It means also in terms of resources they become diminished. What does it mean? It can even lead to conflict, because the little that is there is creating conflict, and you find people starting to fight. Politically, it also does not mean well politically in terms of leadership. You've seen what keeps happening in some of these countries in terms of even political leadership. So if we continue to ignore the big elephant in the room, right now we seem to be somewhere in the middle, and we're like, okay, we are comfortable. Nigeria is doing worse. Uganda is doing worse. So we're still good. We're still good. But if we continue not dealing with it, then we'll be dealing with a very serious crisis. And going back to the question today, that is now when we'll actually now see corruption as a human rights violation, because you'll be unable to meet the basic civil, political, social, economic, and cultural rights.
That's what concerns me, is the sense of, it's like we don't quite fully grasp how bad it can get, and it can get there.
It's bad.
It's bad, and it's getting worse. It's already there.
Give an example of education.
Capitation.
We have a collapsed public education system that many people are opting to take their children to private schools, so they pay, and yet a third of our budget, a lot of our money from our budget is actually going into funding education. And that education is not even benefiting the most vulnerable in our society. So corruption is already eating us.
It is.
Look at our health care system. It's broken. We don't have a public transport system. If you look at just the social rights, we are not enjoying Article 43 of our Constitution. Purely and simply because corruption. Now, until the day we see it, and then we wake up and angrily say, no more corruption. And you try to corrupt me in any way, and I tell you, no. I will not bribe a head teacher so that my child can get into this school. I will not bribe a teacher so that my child can go join that trip. And such. I will not elect so and so because I do not think that they have integrity. Then that's it. By the way, sometimes I just get exacerbated by this kind of not exacerbated, but
and
I just get
Eric, you're very right. Because it has to come with individuals making that decision that it must start from me. It must start from me. But then there's also the aspect of now dealing with impunity. Because things grow from it starts small, and then it grows and grows and morphs into something that you're then not able to control. I look at for instance, even the corruption in the police. I'm looking at the headline today because it's something related to that, and also the conversation that you had on the compensation of victims of protests. You see, with the police, the corruption has been building up for years. We started with we used to call it petty bribery, and even now when we do a bribery index, the police, like last year when we did a bribery index, the likelihood of paying a bribe, being asked for paying a bribe in the police is 72%, meaning 7 out of 10 Kenyans who interacted with the police in the last year said that they were asked for a bribe. But we've not been able to deal with this. And then now the issues have morphed into something where now we're looking at gross violations of human rights because we didn't hold them accountable for bribery, and now we're dealing
with the monster
deaths.
We need you back, Sheila. We need another conversation. We need to thread on this and also keep it at our part, which again, I'll always go back to that moment that was all of, people on the streets. Like we were there, and then, it was curtailed and co-opted, but you can't say that people are not starting to feel like we need to agitate fully. But thank you so much, Sheila, for just weighing in on that. In the next hour, Hussein Khalid, Executive Director of Vocal Africa. Again, we're threading on rights today throughout. Lest we forget stories of protest victims. He's been at the front line, standing with families. He'll come and share those so that we don't forget protest victims. We keep them in mind. It's coming up to 9 a.m.